We are excited that you're able to join us tonight for our webinar on student-led goal setting and progress monitoring. Specifically this evening, we're going to take a look at how you can implement a student growth portfolio as a leverage to support students with student goal setting and progress monitoring to drive academic outcomes. We also have a one-pager for you this evening that has all of the links and information that we're going to be covering and sharing. So we will share that with you now in the chat. And I also just want to let everybody know that we are going to be recording this session, but we will be pausing the recording so that folks can feel open and welcome to participate in a discussion. All right, my name is Erin Coker, and this is my third year at GSN as a senior director. I have the privilege of being able to support schools across the state in Colorado with implementing a variety of different education grants, from literacy to school improvement, MTSS. I also work with before and after school programming. Before joining GSN, I worked in Denver Public Schools for 15 years. I was a teacher, a literacy specialist, a school improvement partner, and I have also worked at the national level as a curriculum developer. And I want to pass it off to my amazing colleague, Kirk Banghart.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kirk Banghart. I'm the Vice President of Generation Schools and also the Chief Facilitator of the Colorado Rural Education Collaborative. My background is all in rural. So I'm a former rural superintendent, also a director of teaching and learning, a dean of students, a principal, and then also a classroom teacher. Of course, all of those were in a rural setting. In that. And really, my focus has been around school improvement, around unified improvement plans, a focus really on best first instruction, and then problem-based learning. And so really a lot around what does best instruction look like and how do we focus on school improvement. And so hopefully what we're presenting today is one of those avenues on how to improve schools and doing it. So really excited for you all to join us for some of the tips and tricks that we've seen out there in the field about how to do that. So thank you for joining us.
Awesome. I'd also like to introduce our colleague Phoebe, who is going to be helping with the very important behind the scenes work. Phoebe?
Yeah, happy to be here today, y'all. I am here to help support any questions that y'all might have in the chat, make sure that everybody's voice feels heard, and just here to support y'all today. I work with Generation Schools Network. It's now been about 5.5 months, and I do all of our communications, events, and product development coordination. So happy to be here with you all today.
Thanks, Phoebe. All right, so please take a moment to review our objectives for this evening. So as you can see on the slide, tonight is really going to be about how you can leverage and implement a student growth portfolio that is going to support and elevate student agency, student goal setting, progress monitoring, and reflection. All right, and we want to tell you a little bit about GSN before we dive into the topic this evening. And so first, to start us off at GSN, our vision is that a world where schools and communities work together to ensure every student realizes their full potential in school and beyond. And our mission, Generation Schools Network, increases access to equitable learning experiences by partnering with diverse network of education stakeholders to ensure all students have the opportunity to thrive. And we'd also like to get to know a little bit about you all. So we're going to play a little Who's in the Room. So in the chat, if you could share with us your name, your district and school, the role that you have, and how did you hear about our webinar today? What are you most excited to discuss? So thank you for adding that to the chat so we can all get to know everyone who's in the room. While folks are filling that out, I was just looking at the registration. It looks like we've got folks from Colorado, Texas, Florida, Arizona, Arkansas. So lots of folks from the West, but also somebody from Florida, which is really fun. Zelly Moore from Denver Public Schools, Bruce Randolph, that's right down the street from me. Welcome. Glad you're able to join. Hi, Matthew. Thanks for joining CSU Global. Oh, that's great. The president of the university passed it along. Amazing. Thanks for being here. Our friends at YASPA, I think we saw you all at the last webinar, so thanks for joining again. And Aaliyah, thank you for that pronunciation. That's helpful. So it looks like we have a lot of different variety of expertise in the room, from undergraduate, CSU Global folks, Denver Public Schools folks, nonprofit folks. So thanks so much for being here. Really excited to get to know you all more. All right, so before we dive into the content for this session, we want to revisit the definition for best first instruction. This comes from the Colorado Department of Education, and this is the definition that we use to ground our work when we define best first instruction. So when planning for best first instruction, or BFI, the foundation requires educators to build meaningful relationships with all students, address individual needs, create relevancy by allowing students to see themselves in their learning, and provide opportunities for exploration and expression. The educator utilizes instructional materials and strategies that honors the diversity of their students. And then, as you can see on this slide, the Colorado Department of Education has also provided us with 4 main components: building relationships, meeting the needs of all students, creating relevancy, and fostering disciplinary literacy. And most of the time when I hold these webinars, you'll see that I'll highlight 1 or 2 of these. But what's really exciting about our topic this evening is that it aligns with all 4 bullets. So really exciting stuff. All right, we also want to make you aware of an exciting change at Generation Schools Network regarding the way that we are housing and organizing our professional learning. So we are switching to a new centralized platform to hold all of our related content, including our webinars. So our webinars will continue to be held in Zoom, just like this evening. But rather than registering for each webinar individually through Zoom, you'll now be able to do that through a different, through the GSN Institute. And what's really helpful about this is that it's one central location where you'll have access to all of the past webinars, and you'll be able to register for an entire series, whether that's our Best First Instruction series or our Social Emotional Learning series. So we've provided a link for you all in the one-pager that can get you connected to the GSN Institute. And Phoebe, if you don't mind, also including a link in the chat. It's really simple to register. It's a single sign-on, so, or you can use your email, however you prefer, but you just click register for free, follow the prompts, and then you'll be redirected to the series homepage. This is also a really great way for you to share with other colleagues or other friends what you've been learning, and if they want to join us at a future session. All right, so now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Kirk, who's going to start us off tonight by diving into the research. What does the research tell us about student-led goal setting and progress monitoring utilizing a student growth portfolio model?
Great.
Kirk?
Yeah, so one of the places that we like to start is really the work of John Hattie in visible learning. And so I think many of you in education probably have used his work. And if you haven't, I would really encourage you to take a look at visible learning. He just came out with round 2 of his work, and so he just updated his first version of that. And so it's a great book. I think one of the things, much like Marzano, one of the things that Hattie's work did is really it's about meta studies. So it's the ability to take studies of studies and be able to take that work and say, what does that look? What does that do? What does that look like if we're looking at a lot of data in one places? And so one of the things that I think is really powerful about Hattie's work is really to look at effect size. And so when we look at effect size, one of the things that I think is always helpful is to look and really be able to talk about what is the desired effect size that we have it. And so always in looking at it through his work, one of the things that we have to remind folks is that really the 0.4 is that tipping point that we want to have conversations about, is that anything in his meta study that is more than 0.4 is where we're seeing that effect size having more than 1 year's effect, in that we're wanting to see. And so if we're going to implement something new, we really do want to see something that is greater than 0.4 in that area. And so when we're talking about the work today, everything that we're going to talk about is in that zone of desired effect. And so it is, as you'll see here in just a minute, is greater than 0.4 in the overall effect size for that. And so again, if you haven't dived into Hattie's work, would definitely encourage you to take a look at it. It's sometimes can be a bit heady, but it's also pretty fun to be able to look at it and use it as a great reference to say, if we're starting down a path, is it really something what we want to invest our human capital, our financial capital in schools to move forward on in an area to do that? And so as we look at it, one of the things that we've found when we really look at student-led goal setting is that if we look at John Hattie's work, one of the things that we find is that these actually show up in the top 5 of his work, show up in those areas. And so here's kind of some of his top effect size that show up. And so if 0.4 is that tipping point, you'll notice that all of the highest effect size are way greater than those. And so if we just look at the top 5, so if we look at starting with response to intervention, cognitive task analysis, teacher estimates of achievement, self-reported grades, and collective teacher efficacy, those are of course all greater than 0.1 and higher to do that. And so really what we find is that when we look at the student work that we're talking about, they really, 3 of those 5 really show up in that greater area. And so those 3 that we really feel are really central to our work are teacher collective efficacy, which show up at 1.57 effect size, response to intervention, which in Colorado, since we have so many people on the call who are Colorado based, we really refer to it more as MTSS than RTI, but it shows up as 1.29 in Hattie's work, and then self-reported grades as 1.33 effect size. So again, going back to that original graph or the original visual model that we showed, if 0.4 is really what we want to see as a zone of desired effect, you can see that those 3 really show up on that high level of effect size for those components. So here in just a little bit, I'm going to talk about how those actually play out and how we see those actually affecting kids in the classroom to do that. So as we do that, let's talk a little bit about what we mean about those 3 here in a little bit. And so we'll use some clips to talk about what we mean about those 3. And we'll start with collective teacher efficacy.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the video. You all let me know if you can hear it.
So let me talk about this notion of teachers' collective efficacy. It comes back to groups of teachers working together, fed with their evidence of impact. One of the not meanings of collective efficacy is when teachers get together and talk about kids, about curriculum, about resources. That's not the point at all. And it's not just growth mindsets, rah, let's feel good. That's not the message either. This is hard work. This is getting together and understanding how we're going to have impact on students. I'm sure many of you have read the Gonski report that came out a few weeks ago, and it talked about how we can get teachers to talk about a year's growth for a year's input. That's a major focus of teacher collective efficacy. What does that mean? It doesn't mean effect sizes or test scores. It means judgments, interpretations. And how can we do that as a team to understand what a year's growth looks like in this school with these students? Yes, it's very much related to high expectations. And as Christine Ruby Davies' work has shown, teachers do have expectations for the students, and they tend to either have high or low expectations. And if teachers have high expectations, they're more likely to realise them. Whereas the teacher down the corridor that may have low expectations, unfortunately, they are also extremely successful at realising low expectations. So what are those expectations? What does that year's growth look like across the teachers in your school and across your schools? How can you look at having those understandings of what you expect over a 10 to 12 week period, bringing along artifacts of students' work over 10 to 12 weeks and saying, is this reasonable growth to expect? And this is putting meat around that sandwich of what a year's growth looks like. It's putting meaning around this notion of what teachers' collective efficacy looks like. And the evidence in the visible learning research shows that we have an incredible number of teachers who are having that impact, where their students are gaining more than a year's growth for a year's input. And that recognition needs to be part of the teachers' collective efficacy, when we stop and say it was something that we did. And it's having that very strong belief and action that I cause learning. I am the reason why students learn. And I know that sometimes teachers are so nice and they give the credit to the students and say, oh, the students did the work, or the parents supported them, or the resources were right, or the principal gave me the right time. No, I want every one of you in the room today to say, I cause learning. So let me talk about this notion.
So I think he does a
Let me
great
talk
job
about
of
this notion.
helping explain what we mean by collective teacher efficacy. It's not just getting together in a group and having those things. I think, one of the things that we do know is the DeFores helped us really define what teacher PLCs were. And a lot of times those have been used just as collaborative time. It's more than just getting people in a room. It's having those used in a productive way. We also then know that in order to do the second one that we see is self-reported grades. And so on this slide, Hattie does a great job of explaining what he saw in his meta research around self-reported grades, which again had a really high student effect size, which is in visible learning. He renamed that strategy around student expectations. And so they're highlighted in yellow: student expectations. To express more clearly what this strategy involves, the teacher finding out what are the student's expectations and pushing the learner to exceed these expectations. And I think that last part is really the clear piece. It's not just that a child saying, I think I got an A, I got an X grade, but it's really for them to think about what are the expectations and then how do they push themselves to exceed what those expectations look like. And so one of the ways that we really are able to go after these two areas is really through student growth portfolios. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what is a student growth portfolio. And so, as I said, we'll hit all three of those components. I'm not going to talk a little bit about MTSS because I know we in Colorado education talk a lot about MTSS, but we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, or RTI. But let me talk a little bit more about what are student growth portfolios. So student growth portfolios is a collection of student work that demonstrates that students' progress towards mastering the academic standards. And one of the things that we see when these are done is that it helps build confidence. It helps students really see how their achievements and their results are building over time. It helps them build their own self-awareness and being able to set goals, and really helps them with decision-making skills. And then it also allows them to share these with others and be able to articulate what those goals look like, not only with their peers, but also with their adults and what that looks like. Now, one of the things that we find is that on a single slide, boy, that sounds easy. And sure, of course we can. And it may be that straight line. But unfortunately, what we know is as we work with schools, it's never quite that easy. What it really looks like is that messy, squiggly line through that process. But what we have found is that the more and more schools do this, the more and more educators engage in this, and the more that we can get folks to do this process, the more that effect size that Hattie talks about really comes to fruition with kids on all levels of a spectrum. And so this works for currently high achieving schools. It also works with currently low performing schools. And so one of the things that's amazing is it works on both ends of the spectrum, regardless of where a current performance of a school is. It's just about getting a school to really adapt to the current level of performance and jump in and being able to do that. So one of the things I want to talk about is what is a growth portfolio is and what it's not. And so first of all, what it is about a body of work that's continually evolving. So it's not just showing at one point in time, or it's not just my best work. So this isn't like an artist portfolio where we put in just my best work. It also is something that involves both teacher and student choice. So it's not something that we just say, hey, just the teacher is pulling the best work that they want to show. We also have students helping make sure that they have buy-in, they have student choice into what does that look like. And that it also shows a varying choices of what the student can do. It's not always about core academics. It may also show art. It may show other things, skills that they have that they're exceptional in, and can be able to highlight that. As I said, it's not just about their best work or what they do. And then it's not just solely led by the teacher, that the students want to be a part of it. And then it's not just assessments. I think one of the things that we find, especially driven by our federal laws and our state laws, is that we get very driven by achievement scores. And though achievement and test scores can be hugely important in what we do as a business model for education, it doesn't mean it's the only thing that makes up a body of work of a child. And so we want to make sure that we're using assessment, but that it is not the only thing that makes up what goes on for a student in that portfolio. We want it to be well-rounded and show different components of who that child is. And so again, when we think about what it is and what it is not, it's not just stuck in one set of pieces in those components to do that. So one of the things that we like to do is make sure that we do have a balance between quantitative and qualitative assessments and data. And so things like CMAS reports, NWA reports, DIBELS scores, and SAT are all things that are very valid to have in a growth portfolio. It's because they do have some normative value that can show over time, are we seeing a change, and is that benchmark? But then we do want to see things that are teacher created, like unit tests, those kind of things. But then also things like written samples from students, essays, short constructed response. And then as Aaron keeps pointing out, we tried to do in your one pager, there's lots of examples that we put in there and links of different examples that can be put in the one pager that you can put into these components to do it. But one of the things that you want to do with a growth portfolio is really think about how this will evolve over time, because we're wanting to try to tell a story about what a child looked like at the beginning of the year, what did they look like at the middle of the year, and then what did they look like at the end of the year? Because that is the story that you're telling through a growth portfolio. And that growth portfolio really is then helps tell the story for a lot of the constituents that you're working with. And those constituents really include the child, the parent, and the teacher, as well as the school system overall. And so when we're able to start at the beginning of the year and say, here is our starting point, and then how are they growing and evolving, lots of powerful things start happening, is being able to say, here as the child, here's where I started. I was able to set goals, and then I was able to move to now here is where my work is in the middle of the year, and then finally here is where my work on that same set of standards or the same set of skills of here where I was at the end of the year, and that component. And so all of that is changing throughout a school year. Now, a lot of times what we see in our traditional model is that a lot of that work gets sent home. Or if you're a middle school, high school teacher, a lot of that work ends up in the trash. And so unfortunately, that record of that change, sorry, that change over time gets lost. And so what we have under our current model a lot of times is just the look of the snapshot of here's what the percentage score on that test or on that unit. Well, how that compared to the end of the unit may look very different, and we may not have that comparison for that child to celebrate, for that parent to celebrate. But when they can see that writing sample of how their writing looked at the beginning of the year and how that writing looked at the end of the year, that's a very impactful difference to see what a year's worth of time does that. And then to be articulating that goal difference of what they set and how that goal was either obtained or not obtained in that process of doing that is really a powerful process of doing that in that. And so one of the ways that we help kids be able to do that is by having reflections on an ongoing process. And so one of the things that we do is not only have them reflect on what is their best work, but also on process pieces. So I apologize, I got a tickle. What are they learning? And so what is the process pieces that they're going through during that time to do that? So again, in our one pager, we included some different reflections, also around growth, and then next steps that kids can use around prompts that they can add to work that they're putting in their portfolios that they then can use to have those articulations of why work was chosen or used for their portfolios that they went to do that in that process. So one of the things I do, I've been doing like probably close to 20 minutes of talking at you. And so one of the things I'd like to do is kind of stop for a minute. I think we are going to pause the recording. And one of the things that I'd like us to do is just talk a little bit about what about the growth portfolios that I've described is most exciting to you when you think about implementing that for yourself, or what questions would you have about what I've proposed in so far as a concept.
We're going to take a look at connections we see when implementing a student growth portfolio. I think that this is really important because it's important for us to think about how this strategy can build off of and maximize the systems that we already have in place so that we are working smarter and not harder. And more importantly, so that the strategy is fully integrated into what we do every day at school. So as you can see on the slide, we're going to take our attention to 3 connections this evening of other school systems and structures. We're going to look at our PLCs, where teachers collaborate and plan. We're going to look at student-led conferences and MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. So to start us off, when we think about cultivating teacher collective efficacy, one of the biggest levers are our collaborative planning times, our PLCs, our professional learning communities. And when we think about student growth portfolios, there's a lot of work that we can do together in our PLCs. So we can co-plan assignments for the portfolio. We can look specifically at how we are checking for understanding. We can look at how we are aligning to the level of rigor of our grade level standards. We can review student work and collaboratively analyze and identify gaps and plan the reteach together. We can discuss the student work reflections and selections and discuss, for example, are our students selecting work that shows and demonstrates their understanding of the standard and the content that we're teaching? Are they reflecting on their work in the way that we had hoped? So as you can see on this slide, there's many ways that we can bring our student portfolios with us to our professional learning communities and to really elevate the planning and the collaboration that we're doing with each other. I have also included for you all 2 different student work analysis protocols on your one-pager, the Atlas and the RIDE protocol. So take a look at that when you have a sec in your one-pager. In terms of MTSS, implementing a growth portfolio that is living and evolving in the classroom, excuse me, as students are learning and growing, it really sets them up for success when it comes to the MTSS process, because we have a ready-made body of evidence that we can use to support the process. We have evidence of the work that we have done as teachers. We've created scaffolds, we've differentiated assignments, we've implemented interventions in the classroom, and it's all contained right there in the portfolio. And the student work reflections can really give us a lens into why or why not those interventions are working for the student, which really supports us with that root cause analysis. And then finally, we want to highlight the importance of implementing a student-led conference model along with the student growth portfolios. When the student is owning and reflecting their own work in the classroom, we can naturally extend that to conferences by asking the student to share their assessment data, their goals, and their progress with the adults in their life. So the student can exercise agency and can really lead the meeting. And we also have a template that we've shared for you to get you started with student-led conferences, and that's also contained in your one-pager.